Hi there, I'm Levi. I personally engage with an adversary at the worst time of the year, on vacation during the winter holidays. This was a week-long back and forth, and several times I built a new wall, they climbed over it. This presentation will share what a card tester is, what they're getting out of abusing merchants, and the tactics I tried along with the effectiveness of each tactic. I'm speaking from my own experience and not for or on behalf of my current or previous employers. I've also verbally confirmed that I can speak about this incident with the CEO of the merchant where this happened. So what is a card tester? It helps to explain what motivates this adversary. They are a critical slice of the fraud market. They never acquired the cards from the merchant, nor are they spending big on the cards they get. Instead, they have 100,000 garbage grade cards, and they can sell 1,000 known working cards to somebody else for a lot more. The protections you have for low-volume fraud won't hold back this kind of threat. Before this, all I had were max tokenizations per user per day, per IP address per day, and whether the payment order details were matched to any historic fraud, using like the phone number, delivery address, or the card hash provided by the payment gateway. This handled most of the troublemakers who would spend another $50 to $200 with the intent to charge back by creating new accounts. Their objective isn't to spend money, it's to assess, again, whether the card accepts an authorization and to sell a list of live valuable cards. If they made a merchant suddenly and tried to do 100,000 authorizations, the payment gateway would suspend them far before they found all the live cards. They need another merchant with sufficient scale to absorb the risk and to be an oracle to whether the card is live or not. So why was I a good oracle? I made a mistake. I thought, if Google is doing it, then I can do it too. When I added my card to my Google Wallet, I saw that they did a $1 authorization to make sure that it was good before a series of convenient purchases with the Google Wallet. Under my leadership, when it came time to revamp our payment gateway integration, I said, let's do that too for sign-in users. Little did I know at the time that this was the behavior that card testers want exactly. The authorization got voided afterward, so affected parties won't even see anything reach their statement. They might if they have a notification on their app. 8 months later, while on a holiday, somebody noticed this signal and set up a campaign to abuse it over the winter holidays. Some folks noted that something was odd while I was out, but didn't investigate further. A day later, the CEO got called by the bank. The first thing I did was turn off that feature flag for authorizing tokenized cards before saving to the wallet, but the attack continued. That wasn't enough. While the $1 authorization was gone, the wallet tokenization itself continued to be abused as a liveness oracle. From Braintree's documentation, card networks will sometimes run a $0 verification before issuing a network token to ensure the card is active and not fraudulent, similar to a regular card verifications run at the time of vaulting. Which networks and which issuers internally act as an oracle isn't publicly documented. Either way, the card tester still found value in abusing my merchant, and I had to stop it. So we had an anti-fraud provider, which I won't name, that examines clients over time and makes a decision immediately after authorization on whether to continue or to void the transaction and to give no information back. It didn't help at all. The adversary wasn't trying to place orders. They were trying to tokenize cards outside the ordering flow on the account management page. We could not rely on this anti-fraud provider at all, especially in the moment because there was no data from our service to inform their model on natural behavior versus abusive behavior. The adversary was not chill at all. They were doing 500 cards per minute, and I had to cut them off without cutting off our own customers. And I had to do this without updating the mobile applications. Let me share what they were doing. They would create a new account with a random Gmail account that doesn't exist. They would add 9 cards one at a time to the wallet directly with the client API just skirting underneath our 10 means ban, and they would measure the success for each vault operation and wait a few minutes or even an hour before adding another on that session. Every operation went through a residential VPN with fresh new accounts with sufficient delays to avoid rate limiting and on IP addresses we've never seen before. So I had to find where they were. It helped that their load was constant, whereas customer traffic followed a predictable pattern over the day. In the logs at 4 a.m., I found that every account that tried to tokenize a card had the same behavioral profile. They never made requests that our web and mobile applications always hit. Their bot took the most reduced pathway to automate account creation and card tokenization, nothing else. Since our sessions had flexible server-side storage, I could simply add a flag to indicate if they hit those minimal endpoints and decline all tokenizations after a similar randomized sleep. It would also softban the user and prevent all future attempts from ever reaching tokenization. And I added these periodic logs to Slack so I could keep tabs on their continued activity. After 6 hours, the alarm went quiet, then on and off again. So I knew that my automatic recognition remained effective when the alarm stayed on, but I'm guessing they woke up and saw their metrics flatline. It stopped for a few hours, then came on the same IP address as they were testing their abuse automation, probably at home in New York City. I kept this IP unblocked so I could tattle on their future patterns as the adversary tested without using a residential VPN. The adversary likely took probably a man-in-the-middle recording or an HTTP archive of a natural session where the card successfully tokenized, then replayed it back a few times with fresh accounts to verify and that it would work without hitting the IP address limit. They bisected their recording and found the one endpoint that invisibly set the session flag, saying that they were a normal user. After reboot, they started up and saw things work again until I caught them. For each platform, web, Android, and iOS, I set up additional behavior session flags that each platform would independently trigger as additional layers of defense that I could turn on with these feature flags to step up the difficulty. I kept one defense layer in reserve as an alarm-only indicator that kept me apprised of their activity and allowed me to attribute their attacks in the logs to discover their behaviors. They also brought friends. Did you know? A second and third adversary appeared. Their request patterns were notably different, and they had different delays between requests, and they quickly gave up because I guess they didn't share the knowledge about the first layer of difficulty I implemented. And then I got a little bit mean. I looked back at their tokenization success rate from the time while I was enjoying my vacation, and I suddenly started routing fake data like 4111111 and so on to the sandbox environment from our production servers when their requests were recognized and otherwise returned failures to mimic the rate they were getting. This gave me an extra day while they were still figuring out difficulty level 2. During that extra day, I added unreasonable amounts of logging to get every single signal I could get without the PAN or SAD ever getting to our server, since we rely on tokenization with the payment gateway's SDK on the client. While unsuccessful tokenizations gave no information, the successful ones indicate that the same card hash, a fingerprint that gives no reversible or brute forceable information about the PAN, because it's not actually hash, it's more like an HMAC, would appear across different accounts again and again. So if I gave them rejection on their first card, they knew that the process was broken. Their process evolved to start using the same card for the first tokenization on every batch. And with that, I saw them testing again in New York City until they defeated difficulty level 2 and then set it off in production, and I took advantage of that. I had a way to make things mildly more expensive for them. I could set up a tripwire on the card hash, so if it's used multiple times across different accounts in a short amount of period, then the card hash itself can be burned, and any account attempting to tokenize it will get fake data back and the account will get banned. They'd have to start burning cards if they wanted to keep using this method to vet their production quality. Now, I really should have seen this earlier. They made a really silly design decision in their bot. Every request got a randomly selected residential proxy IP. A session would jump from IP address to IP address between every request, even within the same 10 seconds. Suddenly I realized if somebody's jumping across 3 or more IP addresses before tokenizing, they're likely this bot. I threw in enforcement of difficulty level 3 the minute they crossed level 2 and began adding IP addresses as sets to the session. Another signal I should have seen, every request got a randomly generated user agent string. Have you ever seen a user agent of Chrome from 2016 reporting a WebKit version from the future? Well, they did. I guess they were hoping that a firewall would give them unique user agents a pass, and all I had to do was collect at least 3 user agent hashes on a session to start blocking them. And once again, their New York City IP address got busy and beat difficulty level 3, but the moment they threw traffic through their bot proxy, it got caught by the IP address and user agent noise. They stopped, tried again, saw success at home, and tried again on the bot network and saw failure. I'm guessing the residential proxy was some other black hat service that randomized things on their behalf and to their detriment. By the way, don't connect your smart TVs to the internet. So for 3 days, they continued to iterate and fail. Even though I had them stalled for now, I knew that they might eventually figure this out. And it would be harder and harder for me to fight back. It was getting too expensive for me to continue this strategy, and I had to turn the tables. I had to make further engagement against me more expensive. I had to put up a wall that would deter them enough to leave me alone. It was Christmas. So I was constrained by the application contract. I could change the web, but the mobile applications were outside of my reach, both in skill and how responsive I would have to be. What's least expensive for me? and most expensive for them. I considered a few options like client-side fingerprinting, the same thing that Cloud CAPTCHAs and Cloudflare Turnstile does, or even computational challenges like Anubis, but that would break the application contract. My only option came down to the account creation step. At the time, it was untapped and frankly ripe for abuse. Random email, random password, and suddenly an authenticated session that can tokenize cards. It was time to change that. Your first thought might be, well, throw a CAPTCHA on it. And I'd say, in the words of Claude, you're absolutely right. Except the app account creation endpoint didn't have a CAPTCHA, and the web account creation endpoint wasn't deciding anything on the reCAPTCHA v3 score or even the presence of it. Mobile account creation had to be shut down for now, and I needed to do something about reCAPTCHA v3 when it gives a low score like 0.3. Even I, during testing, could trigger a low score. While not ideal in my eyes, I figured that falling back to reCAPTCHA v2 with the stop signs and buses would be a reasonable fallback to get through. I deployed 2-layer CAPTCHAs at first because it was the fastest thing I could change to halt the attack, and it did. I figured the adversary was using a basic Python script to run the attack. Retooling to support browser automation would push them back further off for more than a day. You need more than browser automation to solve a CAPTCHA, though. Dedicated services exist to solve them for a price of like $1 to $3 per 1,000. My objective was to make this more costly and compute to run browser automation and to pay for these seriously sketchy services. Again, this was to buy time so I could implement the quick version of our long-term solution, email verification. They were using made-up Gmail accounts. I briefly matched in the pattern. It was like a UUID at gmail.com and used that to softpad them. But like any other behavioral gate, that didn't last long. It turns out that having a functional email address is a big ask for somebody hoping to cycle through 100,000 credit cards, now limited to 8 cards per minute since they're trying to use a known working card as quality control in each batch. So one-time passcode over email requires that the adversary have a reliable way to register new accounts on a domain that we can't ban, like at gmail.com. They could have used disposable domains like at besttempmail.com, but then I could just look up on a disposable email domains list and ban them all. It was at this point that they called it quits. So the attack ended, and let me do a recap. It was almost New Year's, and I had finally a full 24 hours without my alarm going off. Matching on exact input patterns like emails is too fragile. It takes seconds for the adversary to swap in code to randomize input links and styles. Boolean flags on session data, however hidden to the adversary, is trivial enough that they can figure it out within an hour or two. Using even more behavioral and network signals to generate a risk score later on is helpful, but still at risk of being defeated. Unusual connection behavior and inconsistent headers like the user agent on the same session may be helpful to identify novice uses of residential proxies. But what really sealed it was raising the cost to continue automated abuse with CAPTCHAs and, more importantly, leaning on email providers to employ effective abuse mitigations. But this did have some casualties. People can't register on our apps anymore, and the email one-time passcode leaves much to be desired. What can we do so that we can react more nimbly next time? Web and mobile apps need a unified account creation flow. Having 3 was too much for me, and the mobile apps are mechanically unable to respond to an escalating attack. Try an Apple, push an Apple app every hour of the day and see how fast that goes. It doesn't. And there was one way we could lean on the anti-fraud provider, outright removing the ability to add cards from the account payment page and instead relying on adding cards during the checkout process itself. Sucks, but what can you do? I had to disable that feature. We've had it since the company launched for over a decade, but somebody had to ruin the user experience. There's just not enough signal data to safely allow people to add their card to their account outside the full ordering flow. By binding wallet addition to the existing flow that our anti-fraud provider could decision on, we have shared the risk to another party that actively works to reduce our risk. Back to account creation, though. Have you ever used a bank app when you try to sign in, it opens a secure web session through iOS or Android where it opens up like a little pop-up through their native UI? Or when you try to go through a website and see a hint of an iframe in a modal that appears for logging in? I find it to be less ideal in user experience, but given the responsiveness I require to even respond to an attack, web authentication on all platforms gave me the most flexibility to respond should another attack occur. You don't need to bring in the whole web app to authenticate. A small front end and back end can handle it for you if you manage your own authentication. You can also delegate this to another identity provider, and they'll probably do a better job. If the price per monthly active user makes sense for you, you should probably do that. In my case, I made a backend with a state machine that watches for unusual signals like IP jumping and user agent randomization too. Whether in a browser or in an app, you need a way to tell the other application that the user is authenticated now. For native apps, your frontend could have a JS bridge callback, but that's not an ideal path forward. Instead, the client can redirect to an app-specific callback URL like myapp://auth signed in and with an access code in the query parameter. It gets a little bit more complicated with proof key for code exchange, which I also recommend implementing. With this, both account creation and authentication can be brought into one flow that can be adapted as needed without reducing functionality or security for our native applications. Still, OTPs suck. But what can we do? I really don't like OTPs. They're phishable and annoying. There's magic links too, but that still requires an email arrive and be opened. So what else can we do to keep this effective security level? Social sign-in. Whether through Google, Facebook, or Apple, you've verified your email address with them, and we can lean on that as an OpenID Connect relying party. Plus, social sign-in buttons work through native UI too. You can also skip the web popover if you use their SDKs on the app, as long as you trust the social identity provider, even Amazon, to verify emails. You can let the customer assert their email identity to you through any of these methods. Now, in the future on the web, there is a Chrome origin trial for email verification. With this, the user can verify their email within the browser without having to wait on SMTP, IMAP, or first-party client syncing back and forth, or have to deal with emails going to spam. This is still early in development, and only Gmail and my own site implement it, and Gmail doesn't even follow their own specification correctly, but they're working on it. Alternatively, and far closer to a Chromium near you, is Chrome's Federated Credential Management API. Like email verification, this is another form of sign-in that you can use on the web. So it is a draft standard that Safari and Firefox won't have implemented anytime soon, but it lets a relying party like you ask for a credential from one of many services at once. And a recap. So I couldn't have gotten through this without a ton of logging, specifically logs that I could correlate over time, IP addresses, sessions, and so on. Payments and account identity need as much data logged as you can safely do while staying PCI compliant. You don't know what you'll need until you're facing an attack. Residential proxies are hard to automatically recognize, and you might get lucky like me and have an adversary where their IP address is switched between every request without them realizing it. Request-based gating won't buy you much time, even less now that adversaries have access to AI agents. While under attack, buy yourself some time and look at your options and see what you can do to make it more expensive to attack you. And once they're gone, maybe make it more expensive to return and keep those alarms on in case somebody starts poking around. Thank you for attending my talk. I'm here volunteering at the Payment Village, so if you have any questions throughout the weekend, I'm here. And if you're curious or want to talk to me, you can reach me at levischuck.com.